Hello, everyone, and welcome to Thesis Driven's Buy Box featuring roster family clubs today. Really excited to have Dawson and Nick on the show and a bit of an update on actually a very big update on a thesis driven letter, one of our most popular that we did a bit over a year ago. I'm joined today, as always, by my partner at Thesis Driven, Paul Stanton. So, regular thesis driven readers know I care a lot about making cities more warm, more welcoming for families. And on the flip side, one of the things I've been thinking a lot about, we've been writing a lot about, is what do we do with obsolete office space? So, this concept and what we're doing here brings a lot of threads together that are very exciting and of interest to us and thesis driven readers. So, I'm going to hand it over to Paul now to introduce Dawson and Nick and share a little bit about how we all know each other here.
Awesome. Thanks, Brad. Dawson, Nick, so psyched to have you guys and very excited to do this. I've known Dawson and Nick for a long time now. I worked with them while they were at Common Desk, and we helped to expand them into North Carolina. And I basically lived on your couches for about 3 months in Dallas, and we got, closer than we probably needed to in that period. But it's been so exciting to watch your journey and go from, selling Common Desk to WeWork to now, launching roster family clubs and launching Stonethrow. So without further ado, I want to hand over to you guys. It'd be great to just give us a quick intro on both of you, but then really get into the origin story. I mean, let's start by talking about let's take us back to WeWork buying Common Desk and kind of I know you went through a lot of soul searching about what you wanted to do next. So it'd be great to hear a bit about that process and how you landed on Stonethrow and roster family clubs.
Well, I'll say this. I think it was such a blessing over a course of 12 years to be able to, start an operating company, scale it to 26 locations nationally, and then go sell it to one of the largest global competitors in the world. So it was an awesome journey. And I met Dawson in 2016 at a co-working conference in New York. He was working with a large like advisor to institutional landlords at the time and advising them on the future of office. He had a great Rolodex of landlords, and we were at the point with Common Desk where we were really ready to scale, and I needed a head of real estate. And so he came on board as a partner, one of our only partners in the business, and really gets all the credit for helping us get to the size that we ultimately got to when we sold to WeWork. And
besides Paul.
Yeah, besides Paul. But, and so it was an incredible journey. We could spend hours just simply talking about that. But really, where our new story begins is we did the typical stay on for 2 years post that sale, and towards the last few months of our tenure at WeWork, I knew that I was like, man, if I could partner with Dawson moving forward, that would be incredibly fun. And I think we both knew that we love the operating business. We love the business of the club model for a lot of different reasons. I mean, one, the recurring revenue of membership is awesome. It's a corner of hospitality where you get to really know your customer. You get
See them all the time.
Yeah, they come in 2-3 times a week. You get to know their spouse, their dog, their family members. And so as we started kind of dreaming again, I think the first thing on the whiteboard was like, man, we want to stay in this like membership club business. And due to non-competes, we knew we were getting kicked out of office. I'll let you kind of continue the story from there.
Yeah, on my end, just on partnering up with Nick, I got to see Nick's character through a tough time, right? Like COVID was a brutal hit to the flex shared office industry. And there was certainly a period there where cash was relatively tight for Common Desk. And a big character moment for me as a partner in the business was seeing Nick, who was a guarantor on all of Common Desk loans, and how he behaved when cash got tight, both in terms of, helping lead us and dig the business kind of out of a tough position and into really a great outcome for everybody, our investors, our members, but then also seeing how Nick handled like the PPP money in particular. I think it was very in vogue to kind of slow roll people back into the office. And, Nick, we're going to do the same thing with roster, really prioritize the employees and said, hey, I'm still in a tough spot, but I'm going to immediately distribute this money to furloughed employees, get our 20 and 30-year-olds back up and running at Common Desk. And seeing that and knowing what was left on Nick's personal bank account and what was kind of there for him just showed both his confidence in himself and then also just his character when times got tough, because we also got to see how other people behave when times were tough, and not everybody stood up and faced the music the way Nick did. So I was like, hey, if I get to partner with you again, hell yeah.
That's awesome. Also worth noting, you guys did what was, seemingly unthinkable with Common Desk in your ability to get something like this off the ground that was incredibly capital intensive without taking any outside money. Which, I think very few people realized about Common Desk. Everything was backed by venture capital, back in those days. And you guys bootstrapped it from day one, right? I mean, Nick,
Correct.
I'm pretty sure you still own like 98% of the company when it sold.
That's correct. We had a lot of debt. But we never took on any equity. So
Edit that part out.
But it was certainly a fun journey, and I think there's a lot of years there that helped solidify why Dawson and I wanted to continue on as partners into this next journey. And so those last few months at Common Desk, I mean, we were obviously we were starting to dream again, and as soon as we were done, which was right around January of 2024, we're like, okay, we want to stay in this private club space. And we started by just simply saying, hey, we're going to go see everything out there. Like Dawson and I both have never been really your classic country club people. We don't belong to a country club in Dallas. And so we spent a few months just simply touring all of the country clubs, hunting and fishing clubs. We went to London for spring break and toured a lot of different type of social clubs in London. And a thesis slowly started to form that, with these other clubs, pretty much every single other club that we visited, the clubs were created for really the dads and the grandfathers. And it was kind of a good old boy spot to hang out and go play golf, play tennis, drink, and
Even if
network.
there were kid spaces, the culture was kids behave, kids be dressed up, kids don't run around the pool. And so even if there were kid spaces, they were an afterthought for clubs that had clearly indexed really heavy to the golf experience and dad and grandpa.
You can feel it, like a lot of these traditional older clubs, they simply have a few different audiences that they're trying to appease. And, anytime you're trying to create a brand or an offering for multiple audiences, things get tough. And you certainly have, typically a group of people that isn't getting first priority. And so I feel like we had our aha moment when we're like, man, how cool would it be if we could go start a private club in Dallas that was for families only, and especially families that have younger children, putting the children on a pedestal, almost kind of putting them as the priority, putting them first.
Yeah. And I'll give you a quick story on that. Like a little micro version of the aha moment for me was I took my son Jack, who's 3 years old, to a birthday party at Lakewood Country Club. And like Nick said, country clubs were not really on our radar. But at that birthday party, I mean, it was a pretty awesome time. Like we were at the pool with the host couple that took us there. And then they're like, hey, why don't y'all stay for dinner? And there's a kids bingo night going on tonight, so the kids can go do bingo. I had first time in years that I've sat down and finished a meal and finished a margarita and felt like an adult. And Jack comes running back to our table with like 6 buddies, and he's had the time of his life. We actually get to see them, their sight lines at that club to the bingo. And I was like, dude, is this if you just isolated this part of the country club experience and then enhanced it and dropped all the things that make country clubs expensive, maintaining a golf course for $2 million a year, resurfacing tennis courts when 7.7% of people play tennis more than once a year. Like, if you just isolated for this and made it better, man, I think you've got every family in the world's attention, because what family doesn't want incredible activities for their kids, opportunities to let their kids explore passions, childcare, trusted and secure environment, kind of all in one.
And so, and then you take so talk a little bit about distressed office, right? I mean, you now need to think about a home for this. And you come from the office world, the distress the office world is in, also how boring and monolithic office is, especially suburban office. So how did you go from like, all right, there's this really cool operating model to let's layer it on to this, distressed asset class that we know really well?
Well, that was kind of an interesting moment, and it's not as clean as you would think the story might be.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, we had called on this building, okay, in a very neat area of East Dallas, back in our Common Desk WeWork days, through the lens of Common Desk, and it's a neighborhood office building. It's about 50,000 square feet. It's got really neat kind of prairie style architecture to it. And I think we're all real estate hipsters and nerds, in this room. And I've always been intrigued about this building. So we called on it probably a year before, a year before we left WeWork, and the broker was like, "Hey, look, like building's empty, but it's under contract right now. And if something happens, we'll keep you guys on the list and we'll call you back." And so a year goes by. Dawson and I are now deep into this idea of a family first club. And this broker calls us back. This is probably like May or June of 2024. And he's like, "Hey man, you guys called like a year ago on this building. Contract fell out. Would you like to come take a look at it?" And so sure enough, Dawson and I drive out there, and it was one of those magical moments where it feels like something is just kind of pulling the idea forward a little bit, where you're like, I can't believe what we're looking at. This building sits on a massively oversized lot, which is like 3.65 acres, way bigger than you would need a lot to be for this type of office building. It's 3 stories, just about 50,000 square feet.
I think it parked at like 11 per.
Yeah. And it's embedded in probably the most family-centric neighborhood of all of East Dallas. Like, it's just the demos are like perfect.
Maybe all of Dallas.
Yeah,
right. If that and the Park Cities would be the only neighborhoods where families stay from pre-K through high school.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the building itself has like this. I mean, if you never knew it was a professional office building in its prior life, you think maybe it was designed to be a clubhouse because of the prairie style architecture. And so it was a crazy deal. And we were able to get it because the previous owner had sold off the roof rights to an antenna company on like a 40-year deal
with the devil.
Yeah.
Like, he didn't lease the roof.
No,
he encumbered the roof.
Yeah.
And so we got it for $12 a land foot. The raw dirt next to us went for 25, and a building down the street with a school on it went for mid-30s. And so it was like, thank God for these guys who basically made it so this building could really only be office, a unique idea like ours, or possibly a church or a school.
Yeah, you couldn't demo the building, so it took a bit of a radical idea.
So thinking about radical ideas, I mean, let's go into the design here. And how did that envisioning come up of, taking what you had seen at, Lakewood Country Club and thinking about this old office asset and saying, hey, here's how we translate what we see and what we love to this building that's very different than a traditional country club?
Yeah, well, one thing I will say just in terms of process is our original concepting around that building was like a 18,000 foot program with the space, and still using the outdoor space significantly. But I think one thing that it was really Nick's idea early on in the process was we knew we'd have to rezone the building. And so Nick said, why don't we make this a bit of a public campaign we put out a Dallas Morning News article and a splash page and said, if you're a family who wants to who's interested in supporting us and also has ideas, shoot us a note. And 1,000 families wrote in off of one newspaper article and also wrote what they think of it on Facebook, their ideas. Some people wrote mean things on Facebook groups, but it all helped us. So I'll say that a lot of the program was derived from talking to families. I mean, it's been really evolving up until this year because we've now had 397 hours worth of conversations with almost 1,400 parents from inception, and it's changed a lot.
Yeah. A few things that I would say we've learned there on that front, Brad, is that a lot of these families are saying, man, we want a very secure spot, and we want as much space as you can provide for these kiddos to roam and run. And if you think about that, I think all of us are old enough to say, hey, like 80s and 90s, a lot of us grew up in areas of the US where we're in a neighborhood, it feels safe enough where the parents are like, hey, just you get home from school, go outside, go play, go do your thing. We'll see you at dinner time. And as kiddos, we had 3, 4, 5 hours to just go roam, explore, play. And that's a huge part of a kid's development, a kid's childhood. And we've tried hard with this club to make sure that we're achieving something similar to where when you arrive on site, for example, we've pulled out the security check-in from the building. There's almost like a security booth check-in about 50 yards from the building to where you check in and then you kind of go through the gate almost like you're like at Disneyland. And then from there, the kids can just go. They can roam, they can go play. And so from a design thesis, that was right there at the very top before we even really got to, hey, what are the amenities? If you think about it, and we even had a parent say this to us, it's like, man, if you could drop a cantina and a secured off facility to where the kids can go roam and play, you could probably charge $400, $500 a month for just simply that.
Yeah, this dad, this dad literally from one of our early conversations was like, guys, I would pay you $500 to do a private restaurant with a field and a fence around it.
Yeah.
That's all. That's all you need to do. We've obviously taken it many steps beyond that, but I think it just shows this. We've actually got it right here. The anxious generation. I don't know if Brad. I know you've got kiddos. If y'all have read this, but the need for independent play is so critical, especially as your kids kind of get into age 4 and beyond. And so that was a big priority.
And it goes beyond the kiddos. Like I think it's a mistake, and I think it's a bit of a mistake that we've even made a little bit on the early on marketing of this club. But this is certainly not a kids club, right? Like there's an equal amount of space and offerings for the adults. And I think one of the biggest amenities for the adults is that, hey, look, there's optionality when you arrive on site. You can either choose to stay together as a family and have a great family night and everybody's playing and interacting together and making memories. Or there's plenty of nights where you're like, dude, we gotta drop the kids and go work on the marriage for a minute and have that conversation we've been postponing for a few weeks. And I think that's something that Dawson and I have experienced firsthand. And I think that resonates with a lot of parents out there is like, because of this helicopter parenting mentality where we always have to be on, we're overprotecting our kiddos out in the physical world, and we're not letting them roam anymore. They're always at the house. We're always parenting, and parents are losing their freaking minds, And so, like, I think that's been one of the things that, before we even get to the what's in this club of like, dude, like a club where the kids are begging to go to and they're having the time of their lives and they're able to roam and run free allows the parents to relax, sip on a marg, chill out, hang out, have a good time.
Be adults for a second too, which one mom nailed this for me. I was talking to her like early on and she's like, I am so exhausted being super chauffeur, super activity planner, coordinator, creator, super financier, super chef, where I'm cutting out little dinosaur chicken nuggets and putting eyeballs on carrots. Like, is there a place I can go where I can just be super mom? and I show up, the activities are already planned, it's fully secure. And that kind of led us to realizing kind of what some of the killer applications were to go and make sure, hey, like one thing we don't like about the classic country clubs, even from a kids programming standpoint, is they view kids programming as there's bingo night Thursday night, and maybe once a month we've got breakfast with Bluey, and we bring in Bluey, and you pay $12 and it's a thing. But what we heard from our families is no, the fun has to be going on, whether parents engage in it with their kids or not, has to be nonstop, which kind of led us to this idea of our playmakers, our camp counselors who are always there. There's 9 of these people during peak times, and their job is just to be stirring up games and fun at all times, so that that same mom can either be like, hey, I'm going to be super mom and play Lego builder competition with this camp counselor playmaker and my kid, or my kids gets to go do war ball on the sport court and I get to go be an adult.
I think that's an extraordinary insight because, as a parent of 3, the scheduling burden of just like, okay, this activity is happening from 9:30 to 10:30 and you have to show up then to get in. It making it continuous, even if it's lighter and less heavily programmed, makes a ton of sense. And I absolutely love that. So a couple of things I wanted to get into as well. Tell me about the interest thus far from families. I mean, you hit on a couple like anecdotes, but just some of the stats we were talking about last year, really a groundswell of support, and would love to, get a minute from you on that.
We started marketing this thing probably even earlier than we thought we could. I would say, because some of the feedback we got from the banks over a year ago is like, hey, love this idea. It's a crazy new idea, right? So like, we haven't seen anything like it before in Dallas. If we're going to, try to get to the point where we're submitting you guys a term sheet, they're like, hey, we want to see a committed amount of families to where you're covering debt service plus operating expenses day one of this thing open. And for us, as the pro forma has continued to mature, that's continued to be around 600 to 700 families that have signed up, giving their initiation fee, and just said, hey, we are a part of this club. And so, starting about March of last year, we're like, okay, we got to start figuring out the marketing on this thing. We still didn't have a name yet. We had a website, like a rudimentary website that sadly I made, which is, I am not a website designer by any means. But we were like, hey,
it was called firstboutiquecountryclub.com.
Yeah.
Oh no.
And people thought that was the name. So people were like weirdly trying to work it into a sentence. Like,
hey, First Boutique.
So we just joined First Boutique. We're like, oh man, we have got to get a name for this thing quickly. But I mean, it made us laugh because it's like, man, we knew we had great product market fit because, off of a couple of renderings that we did, halfway across the world, and a club that still had no name, people were extremely interested. And so, we had, after leaving Common Desk, we did a lot of studying on, I would say, like just a number of different companies out there that specialize in more of like these product drops and like, really creating a bit of a marketing frenzy but encapsulating it within a time period so that you felt like, hey, like we've got to do something within the next, call it 2 weeks, 3 weeks, or else this thing is going to expire. And so we built basically a program last year where we had 2 different membership drives. Both of them lasted 30 days. The first one kicked off on May 31st with a big club showcase event. We had everybody that was interested in the club out to this really cool private pool club in East Dallas. And we were able to just speak to the heart behind the club. We brought out the playmakers, which are amped up camp counselors that will always be at the club and kind of providing the programming and the play at the club. They got to experience some of those brand elements. And then after that event, an application went live on our website. And we had a goal during that drive of trying to get to 250 families that gave us an initiation fee and signed up.
And we had 484 apply. And we really kind of ate what we could chew. It was just us two to start. We've since built a team around this, but we were having to take 13 interviews a day.
Wow.
And it was like, which by the way, your neck starts to really hurt. It is like it'd be zooming from 8 to 5 every day with a family, and then quickly kind of logging what they thought in HubSpot. And so we ended up with 324 members from those 484 applicants. And it was
Wow.
really like, how can we just get through all these interviews and make sure we're also learning from them, because it's kind of our first time our customer. And where in real estate do you get to have a 30-minute conversation with every single one of your tenants or customers? You know, it was like, hey, let's capitalize on this, that we're hearing, you know, what they're really latching onto.
It was fun. I mean, I think a secret in the private club world is you've got to figure out what your exclusive element is, right? Nobody wants to be a part of a private club where it's open to everybody. And for us, our exclusivity is to intentional families, especially intentional parents with kids that are, you know, typically going to be kind of preteen and younger. And so it was fun just getting to see kind of how these 300 plus families were doing, you know, intentional family, intentional parenting. And a lot of them talked about, you know, having to carefully maneuver into a different school because their child might be autistic or so, like, and you could just feel like, man, like these parents are pouring their hearts into their kiddos, and that's the reason why they found this club with no name and no renderings, and like so early on. And so I think it was a crazy amount of work having 13 interviews with families a day for 6 weeks, but it taught us a lot. It taught us a ton about we were not done with design yet by any means at that point. And so it was so helpful to be able to talk to that many families and then to go back to the design room and say, okay, this is what we need to tweak, or this is what we need to work on, or this is what we need to change.
Yeah.
From there, we did another round in the fall, and it went in a very similar fashion. There was a little over 300 more families that joined with that round. And so at the conclusion of our fall round, we were able to celebrate the fact that we had gotten to that critical number of families needed to go back to the banks, which we did. And we were able to thankfully end our year last year with the term sheet from really the bank that we wanted to work with on this
Big regional
project.
$16 billion bank.
Yeah.
Great people, great culture. And some of the principals just with families in the area really understood the demand. And they're like, dude, I can't go to my kid's school without hearing 13 parents talking about how they got to get in the club. And that was kind of the magic sauce. And I think the drops really helped with that, because it would all happen at once. We would like literally, it was kind of like when Facebook first launched, where like a new school would get it. We'd be like, oh my gosh, St. Thomas Aquinas definitely just figured this out. Like they had a party or something, because we get like 26 apps from one school on a Sunday. You're like, oh, they must have all gone to soccer yesterday and talked about it.
It's funny. I would say something we learned at that time is like marketing is marketing. And it's funny how like we would think, okay, we've got to, you know, take our, you know, step off the gas a little bit on like the capital raising front, because we're going to go into, you know, a 6-week sprint on the membership front. But with the frenzy on the membership front, all of a sudden we're getting LinkedIn, you know, DMs from a family office or a high net worth individual. It's like, hey, I'm seeing this everywhere. Can I talk to you guys about investment? And so it's funny how it's all one thing at the end of the day.
On that note, the bank that we ended up going with, we went to committee on our loan, and our banker was like, hey, we've got 5 of 6 on committee that are supportive. This other guy's not. And then she called us. She's like, we ended up getting unanimous support through committee. And I was like, how did y'all flip this guy? And she's like, we didn't. His son joined the club 4 days before we went to committee and told him, Dad, you got to do this thing. So we thought that was pretty cool.
So as we're talking about the investment side here, you know, and I want to hear also about, you know, what you guys are doing in the project. So I think it'd be really helpful for folks to understand this through the lens of unlevered yield, right? So really understanding, you know, because that's typically the metric in real estate that really talks about how efficient a real estate investment is. So, you know, understanding, you know, what's the going in cost to acquire the project, then how much are you guys putting into the project to make it, you know, Stonethrow? And then what is that kicking off from an NOI perspective? and then can talk about how that compares to other, alternative real estate investments.
Yeah, we bought the project for $2 million,
Huh.
and then total project cost for us is going to be 37.6 million. That's working capital, FF&E, soft costs, the consultants at every, there's more of them than we could have ever possibly imagined. So really that's everything there. From an unlevered yield standpoint, we'll stabilize at about a 20.4, 20.5% unlevered yield on
Wow.
cost. And I think that some people might say, well, that's unique to this deal. But I do think if we were to look at the country club market writ large, like we have a few investors who are involved with like Arcus Golf, who goes and acquires a number of these country clubs. It is not at all uncommon to see mid 30s EBITDA margins on well located kind of country clubs that have outdoor space, and to see some of the very similar unlevered yield on cost profiles. So I think our club's obviously doing an awesome job spitting off a lot of cash, but uh, I think there are several kind of country clubs in particular that seem to have a similar profile. I don't think we're an abnormality on that front.
So 2 to buy, 38 put into it, so it's 40 all in. So then you're kicking off about 8 million in NOI.
No, that's that 37.6 is inclusive of the 2. We're
Got
doing
it.
about 7 mil in NOI.
Got it. So break down the 37. Like what are you building, right? And then, let's talk about the NOI. Where's that, top line revenue coming from, and then what do operating expenses look like?
Yeah, I think the best way, it's not exactly this clean, but I call it the rule of 8, right? Whether we're spending about $8 million outside of the building, that's to go build our acre that we've got out there with a 6,100 foot resort style pool. Y'all, more thought and energy has been put into the pool than probably anywhere else. It mirrors the club, and that there's zones in the pool for early kids, kind of, on a quarter inch of water, to a splash park for younger kids, to a place to do swim lessons, to an adult cove for adults, and even to basketball courts and goals and kind of fun sports activities for the bigger kids. But we're spending about $8 million outside collectively, $8 million on what I would say is like base building. We've completely gutted the building. It was a 1967 build, so we removed all asbestos, but we'll come back with new windows, all new MEPs, enhancements on the roof, kind of everything there. So that was 8 million, and then about 8 million of it is interiors, both between FF&E and all your hard costs there on the interior side.
Got it. And then break down just NOI for us. Where's revenue coming from? Obviously memberships, F&B, some other ancillary revenue sources.
Yeah, I mean, the primary driver, right, is dues. Initiation for us is nice, right? It's a lovely little kind of cherry on top, but our initiation fees aren't so heavy compared to other clubs that it's a huge portion of the income. I think our top line, y'all, I might need to pull it up to just get a refresher, but I think we're around 23 million in top line revenue, and I want to say expenses get to the tens. Do you remember, Nick?
Not off the top of my head.
I might need to pull that up, Paul.
Yeah.
It's been a minute on that front.
Something we're proud of within the pro forma, and we recently, like towards the end of last year, reworked the pro forma to where it's department by department, and so I think it reads really really well for the layman that's jumping into the data room. It's also accompanied by a deep dive, which explains just about every single line item in that pro forma. And Dawson and I think, thought about this a bit uniquely in the fact that, early on, a year and a half ago, when we were starting this journey, we did what I think we probably should have done, which was hiring consultants that are of the industry, in the industry, to help us to not only put together the pro forma, but also to help start designing the restaurant and different components of the club. And we didn't love what we saw. I mean, it's pretty commonly accepted within the private club world that all of your margin most of your EBITDA is coming from membership dues, and the membership revenue, and that almost everything else you're doing on site is a loss leader. And I would say, as operators taking a look at an industry that we've never been a part of, but we've been in an adjacent industry for over a decade, we're like, I don't subscribe to that rule. I think let's take a look at this thing department by department. I mean, if we've got over 1,500 families that are paying to come on site on a weekly basis in a giant beer garden patio and a huge pool space, why can't our F&B make money? Like we're looking at other, like we're doing an ice house style restaurant.
And we're talking about parents, by the way, and families who go to the same two restaurants because they're the only ones with kid-friendly patios in all of East Dallas, and they're always there.
One of them opened a year and a half, 2 years ago, and it's kind of an ice house style restaurant with a big patio and everything. It's doing what, 12
million top
12
line.
million top line at what, a 30% EBITDA margin.
Yep.
And it's killing it. We're like, well, I don't understand why we can't do that. And so breaking the pro forma even department by department so we could at least see it that way was so helpful. Now I want to make this point. We have not underwritten these things as profit centers, but we have set it up in a way where we believe they can be profit centers.
I think if you were to ask Nick and I, certainly we're believers that the demand pool is really strong, so you could raise dues and initiation as we're in this, but I think the number one lever is going to be F&B because we underwrote it to break even though that was against every fiber of our being. We knew that people who hired diligence officers like a family office would understand that almost all other clubs break even or lose money on F&B. And so we wanted to honor that. But we think that this can be a $7-8 million top line restaurant that actually does contribute meaningfully to the NOI of the club.
And to help with that, we've, one of our weaknesses is, we've been operators for many years, but we've never operated a full service restaurant before. And so as opposed to us trying to do everything at this club, we went out and found a seasoned operator in the Metroplex that specializes, weirdly enough, in family style ice house restaurants. They've got an incredible location in McKinney, Texas. And we've brought them in a Chick-fil-A-esque owner operator type agreement to where they're only making money if that restaurant is profitable.
And they're willing to put skin in the game to cover losses, which it feels like we've brought on a true partner in that sense.
Yes. So it's been our way of saying, hey, we absolutely believe that the F&B can be profitable. We've brought on a partner that believes the F&B can be profitable, and they're putting in a heck of a lot of sweat equity to try to make sure it happens.
And to go back to Nick's point on anchoring to the classic clubs, right? We hired a consultant. We won't name the company, but it's from the largest private club operator in the world. And they and look, that firm has been really gracious to us and has advised us on the pro forma and done a lot of great things. But on the food side, they built this 4,000 foot back of house downstairs and a second kitchen upstairs. And we brought in this operator who's every restaurant they've done's profitable. And they're like, guys, that back of house is 2x the size of what you need. And I don't think you need a finishing kitchen on 2 at all. So both from a CapEx perspective, but then just the mentality is so different. And we knew it almost right away when we hired that operator to be a consultant on food, because the first thing they said is, guys, this is going to lose money. And I think it is fun to take a fresh perspective and say, why though?
Yeah. Another like nerdy operator thing that we've really enjoyed digging into on this club is that, capacity is always a question, right? Of what is capacity of the club? And when you're looking at capacity, you've got a few gating factors. You've got, in Dallas, obviously parking, which you New Yorkers didn't have to worry about that quite as much, but we've got parking constraints. You've got, weirdly enough, pool lounger constraints. You've got restaurant dining constraints. And so thinking through this at every single angle has been really fun. But for the restaurant, while we're on the topic, one of the reasons why we chose to go with a bit more of a straightforward, smaller menu ice house restaurant where we can go do the essentials, do the basics really well is because you can also do it really fast.
Yes.
And saying, hey, like, okay, like we have 200 seats at the restaurant. And, at a classic, more of a white tablecloth, faux fine dining experience that a lot of these other private clubs have, you might be able to do 2 seatings a night. But with us, with the family being a customer, Brad, this is going to resonate with you. If you have younger kids, you're like, dude, one, you better give me my IPA beer stat, because I'm going to try to drink 2 of these in the next 22 minutes. And like, if the kids are being, being crazy tonight, we got to get out of here in 25 minutes flat, So you want like a quick service restaurant experience. If the kids are somehow running around, they're having a good time, they're chill, then you can extend that out to 45 minutes, an hour, and that's great. What a good experience. But like trying to make sure that we're thinking through everything from a lens of like, hey, like we get a bit of an advantage with the family being the customer. And one of those advantages, there's a few of them. One of those advantages is the fact that like the restaurant can be a little bit different from what you're experiencing at your private social club, where, adults only are kind of the customer.
Not to mention the ability to blend. I mean, I think this probably goes back to y'all's original question on strategy, but something we loved about the country club market versus the social club market is your ability to blend costs inside and out, right? Like a sports field, a ropes course. There are outdoor amenities that are really impactful to a family, but that don't cost very much. Whereas in a social club setting, it's like, hey, should we do another lounge? Should we do another event space? And on, after kind of some base building work, you could be in the $500 plus per square foot cost inside with those things. And so I think that's something we've loved about our customer is obviously they're not quite as fussy. They don't need the fanciest of things. They want function. But also we're able to blend costs both inside and out.
Love it. So we've got about a minute here. Would love to, what's next? Quick 30 seconds, what's after the first location? Is it location number 2? Are there 10 of these in Dallas? Is it, is it moving to another state or is it, something totally different?
We've been sniffing around Fort Worth.
Yeah.
Already Fort Worth has all the same kind of elements that Dallas has where, you've got country clubs that are so full, they're not even taking on additional people on the wait list, where initiation fees have gone astronomical.
And then there's only 2 public pools in all of Fort Worth. Whereas if you were to look at a city like Austin, which is actually a smaller population than Fort Worth, there are 46 public pools. Fact check me there, but it's close to that. And so it's kind of mind blowing. Where do you go in the summer as a family in Fort Worth? I don't know.
And one of the reasons why, Paul, we're not scaling the Stonethrow brand, and that's exclusive to just this first East Dallas location, is that I think scale under the Roster Family Club flag is going to be a bit opportunistic, and the fact that there's going to be times when we get to go do something that we do love doing, which is an adaptive reuse of an old office building, right? Because it's going to make sense. There's going to be other times when, we were sniffing around on a 10-acre parcel of land in Fort Worth that's right on the Trinity River. It's beautiful wooded acreage, and it was only 1 acre of net buildable space.
5 acres buildable.
Because most of it was in a floodplain. And so, I think there's going to be a lot of opportunistic buys out there that go back to the original thesis of like, what do these families want? What are they looking for? They want space that's privatized where it's highly secure for kiddos to roam and run and they can sit down and have a cocktail.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The plan is for Roster to, there's been $2 billion private club platforms built out of the city of Dallas, right? Club Corp Invited now is sold to KSL for I think 1.8 billion back in like 2006. And then Arcus Golf is now valued and it has about 70 clubs and is valued around $2 billion. And so we think there's an opportunity to go be through boutique country clubs and clubs of this nature that can exist in an inner loop setting, go be that for families only. And if y'all do have a couple more minutes, we'd love to share just a little bit on who some of our investors are, because I think it's been really fun for us that the first investment call I had for this club, I called this like old school real estate guy, a big name in the Austin real estate community, and I called him, and he was like, "Okay, there's no golf course." I was like, "No golf course." He's like, "And so all this stuff is for families, no tennis." I was like, "No tennis." I told him, I was like, 7.7% of people play tennis more than once a year. 86% will have a child at some point in their lives. I'm picking to optimize for the bigger pool. And he was like, this is too much. It's too crazy. But I think while we weren't a hit with that guy, I think we've really been a hit with successful operators. I mean, we've got operators of F&B and hospitality concepts, but also of prop tech businesses, and kind of other big companies in Dallas. And ironically, that older gentleman in real estate was not an investor for us, but we have gotten a horde of investment from executive senior management at places like Fortress, Invesco, Clarion. So even though our deal may not be institutional at this point, I find it really funny that we've got such a concentration of investors who come from institutional places.
Nick, Dawson, thank you both so much for joining us today. As I said, one of my favorite concepts and projects in the world of innovative and cool stuff in real estate happening right now. So happy to have you on the show today. And thanks to all of our listeners who tuned in. We're going to be sharing a lot more, putting up a profile page for Nick, Dawson, and Roster Family Clubs. So thank you all so much. See you soon.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, guys. This was really
Thanks,
fun.
guys. We'll catch you soon. See ya.
See you later.